So taking wheat, what happened last year is incredibly exciting around wheat because there were some huge breeding breakthroughs. Things like the health grain, a big European project, understanding much more about the breeding and nutrition about wheat, and actually creating what is now the largest database and composition of bioactive components of wheat. So there's a huge amount of knowledge now in terms of what is it, what are the properties of wheat. And then in addition to that, these are the 94,000 gene components of wheat that was identified last year. You know, that's a staggering amount of gene identification, but what this now does is promise to provide a breakthrough in speeding up the process for understanding what are the properties we actually need of our wheat to improve nutrition. And as has been said, you know, we know really the real answer about the nutrition issue. Eat a balanced diet, eat whole grain, do a bit of exercise. Simple, actually, you know, job done, let's go. But actually that doesn't happen. And the reality is, for very many reasons, our food is far more complex than that. So actually having this breakthrough in terms of knowing the component parts of wheat will now speed up the process for actually looking at how do we take the high oil and bran and fibre content of germ right into the endosperm to make wheat even more healthy. Fibre is a really critical component of wheat. Tomatoes, again, you know, this has been a really core part. They're wonderful crops. Thomas mentioned about the work that's been done at the John Innes Centre. There is a huge amount of work that's also been done right across Asia and America on tomatoes. And the black tomatoes there, or purple tomatoes, that Kathy Martin has been working on, has identified very clearly the opportunity for including anthocyanins and in building the power of anthocyanins, which are very good antioxidants, and that means that within our bodies they are able to reduce inflammation, therefore reduce our risk of actually certain cancers and certain heart-related diseases and age-degenerative diseases, to actually then speed up the whole process through GM technology and then enhance health through that process. Other technologies being done in America, taking some very traditional breeds, some of the heritage breeds, and breeding the qualities of the taste of tomatoes with the quality of the growing potential. And there's a new tomato in America now, Tasty Lee, which is actually meaning that because it has a better taste, more people are eating it. And this is the consequences of getting the right diet. And obviously, married to a dairy farmer, our milk goes into David Stowe cheese, Cathedral City, one of the best brands. And, is that right? Yeah. Okay. But one of the things with cheese and the whole area of milk, as Susan has said, saturated fats in milk is pretty low. But actually, more and more work is being done to impact through cow diet, dietary mechanisms, to understanding are there ways that we can increase the amount of things like flaxes to actually not only enhance things like omega-3, which is some of the new work going on at Rothamsted, but also lower the saturated fat of milk, and as a consequence reduce the impact in terms of people's weight. This is the looking at the health by stealth area, because the big issue is healthy diet, people aren't eating a healthy diet. In the short term, are there ways that we can influence and change that diet, sort of without them knowing? And there are ways of doing it, because we need a long-term process going on in this way. And of course, alongside all this is the aspect of behaviour change. A lot of work has, as we go alongside trying to, in the short term, influence what is in our food, bearing in mind increasingly people are eating processed food. We often don't say we produce food as farmers, we actually produce commodities, and I think we need to start gaining much stronger ownership of the word food for farmers. But alongside that, we do need to change behaviour, and changing behaviour is a very slow process. And there's been wonderful work that's been done right from the wartime, where it was essential to change behaviour because people were on rations. There was a lot of the good cuts of meat were going out to the army, and so the things like the offals and the eyes and the brains and all the rest of it needed to be eaten by a population who needed proteins and meats, but actually didn't really like it. And so that behaviour change work has been very carefully and cleverly looked at, and in fact they developed a committee of food habits, and I think maybe, Tim, this would be a good thing to have here in Britain, is a committee of food habits to actually look at behaviour change and understand more about behaviour change. But what was particularly interesting from American work is that you can have an attribute, so the attribute of a food might be it's low in cholesterol, but it's no good if you don't sell it actually with a consequence. And much of our food is either sold as an attribute or as a consequence. And actually putting them together much more effectively in how we market things is really, really key. So the consequence might be you have a lower risk of heart disease. So those sort of things are really important in changing people's behaviour and willingness to eat different foods. And alongside that, of course, is not doing it on your own. And I think this kind of came to mind over the last few years about the community benefit of wellness versus the isolation of illness. It's kind of in the words. And many of the huge successful projects, particularly across Europe, for changing behaviour has to be delivered through communities. So in France, the Approach project has been really successful, where huge amounts of the community has come together to actually effectively change their diet, not saying, eating cakes is bad, but actually saying, well, how do we moderate how many cakes we eat? Not saying, well, gosh, we've now got to eat 7 fruit and veg. It's actually saying, if you're only eating 1 fruit and veg, let's try eating 2. And those sort of elements of step-by-step changes, which are, hugely important. I have only sort of scraped over the experiences I've had, the people I've met, the things I've learnt, the communication, the discussions I've had, but I think it is very clear we need a far more integrated food plan based around nutrition. This is not pump up the volume, boys, we're going to produce more food. This is, let's get the right food, the right nutrition. In fact, there are currently sufficient calories across the world for everybody to have 2,720. The issue isn't with distribution, the right foods, people eating, we're saying, right, we have 9 billion people will be coming along by 2050. Scary thing is they're going to eat like 12 billion people. So putting all these things into context is very key. Embed health as a value when we buy food. Understand the health consequences, the benefits behind food. And David will come onto this a lot more in detail as well. And we need to create more diversity in our food and in our farming.